Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 34 of Chess Basics, things every chess player ought to know. Today we're going to continue looking at a piece fighting against pawns in the endgame, and the piece we're going to focus on this time is the bishop. So we have a situation on the board, pretty typical for this kind of endgame. Let's see. Before I go on, I wanted to mention that there is a qualitative difference between a bishop fighting against pawns and a rook fighting against pawns. When you have a minor piece, like a bishop or a knight fighting against the pawns, there's only two possible outcomes because the minor piece by itself is not enough to deliver checkmate. So either black will queen the pawn and win the game, or else it's a draw. But there's no way that white can win. So white is just fighting for a draw. And when there's a rook on the board, when white has the rook, then of course white still has a chance of winning if he can capture all the pawns. He can use his rook to checkmate black's king. So all three outcomes are possible with the rook, but with a bishop or with a knight there's only two possible outcomes. So white is just fighting for a draw. Now it's white's turn to move, and he can hold a draw here. And the key idea is you have to stop the pawn on a square that's the same color as the bishop. So if the bishop were to get onto this diagonal, then that pawn could not move forward. If it were black's turn to move, then he could just push the pawn forward, and there's nothing that white can do to stop it. No matter where the bishop goes, it can't get to that square in time. It takes two moves to get there, and then after one move, the pawn will become a queen. But it's white's turn to move, and he can just go here. And that stops the pawn from moving forward. And black really has nothing to do. He can try and go after the bishop, but the bishop always has plenty of squares to go to along the diagonal. So eventually pushes the pawn, and the bishop captures it, and it's a draw. So that's the key idea. You need to get the bishop to a diagonal that controls the one of the squares the pawn has to pass through on the way to becoming a queen. And if you can do that, then you can hold the draw. Okay, let's look at the next position. I wanted to take a look once again at the rook versus pawns. As you know from last episode, the two pawns on the 6th rank win if they're connected. Two connected pawns on the 6th rank win against a rook. So I'll just run through that quickly. Rook here, pawn goes forward, it doesn't matter which one. Rook takes, pawn becomes a queen. And black can win. So, but I wanted to look at a slightly different case. What about the case when the pawns are separated? I didn't talk about this last time. It turns out that the rook can hold these pawns very simply, just here. When the two pawns are connected, that doesn't work because one of the pawns can still go forward being supported by the other ones. But here, when they're separated, they don't support each other. And so the rook simply draws a line in front of the pawns, and they can't cross it. So to play this one out, this would actually be a draw because once the rook is there, the king now has enough time to come up and attack one of the pawns, and the black king has to march all the way forward to b3 to help this pawn go forward, and that gives the white king time enough to attack the e-pawn here. So pushes the pawn, he can win the rook, so he can hold a draw here, but white gets the last pawn. So that's a draw, this position. So let's contrast this to the bishop. The reason I was bringing this up, little bit of a reminder, and also I left that out about the rook, how separated pawns are not as strong. The interesting thing about the bishop is that the opposite is true. It's the connected pawns that are weak. And you can see right here, the bishop draws a line, just like the rook draws a line, and the pawns cannot pass it. If one of them tries to move, it was white's turn to move. If one of the pawns tries to move, the bishop can grab it and still prevent the other pawn from moving forward. So that's not good. So this position is in fact a draw. The only chance for black is to try and get his king into play to help assist the pawns going forward. So he might, it's white's turn to move. He might try this, just marching his king down, and he's just too slow. In fact, white can already grab this pawn. Black can get here, and he's protecting the pawn, and he's ready to go to the queening square, but the bishop is already guarding that square, so there's nothing but draw here. Okay, so that's not a win for black, but it might be a win if the king gets close enough. So how about if he's one step closer? So I just moved the king forward to c5 from c6. And it is a little trickier now. Let's see what happens. King here, and now there's one key move that white has to play to hold a draw here. If he just keeps marching with his king, then black comes in here, and this position is a win for black because now we can push the d-pawn, and the bishop sacrifices itself, which it has to because otherwise it's becoming a queen. The king takes, and now the white's king is out of play. Let's back up. White's king is out of play to stop this pawn from becoming a queen. So that would be a win. But that's not the best play by white. So white, let's go forward a couple steps. White moves his king forward, that's correct. Black moves his king forward. Now, if white moves his king again, that's a loss. But he has one move here that holds the draw. Do you want to see if you can guess what that move is? Or figure it out, I mean. No guessing in chess, right? It's all calculation. Okay, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I am going to give the answer away now. The answer is bishop d2. It keeps the king out of that key square c3. So that's the big difference. Now the king has to go around, and once again, white's king has time to get close enough to attack this pawn, the backward d-pawn. And so black can get a queen, he could win the bishop, but white gets the last pawn, and it's a draw. So the answer to how close the king has to be is it has to be even one step closer. It has to already be on the square c4. And so first of all, if white tries to move the king, black gets to the square c3. On b4 I meant. He was on b4. He gets to c3, and he's supporting these pawns, and we already saw this before. King comes in, but it's too late. Queen, and black wins. So let's back up. There's one more try, which is you think, well, moving the bishop to d2 worked last time. Does it work here? But the difference is the king is one step closer. He can go to b3, and as white's king marches in, b2, white's king marches in, and now he makes a queen, forces a trade, and white's king comes in to attack the d-pawn, but he's one step behind, and so that becomes a queen. So let's back up to the beginning. Yeah, so this position is a win for black, and that's how close you have to be to help these pawns. So that's shows the strength of the bishop when operating against pawns that are connected. And you might think it's convenient that these pawns are on light squares and the bishop is a dark squared bishop. But it turns out that if the pawns are not on light squares, they'll be on dark squares. The bishop can attack the pawns and force them forward. As long as the king is not around to protect them, the bishop can attack the pawns, force them forward onto light squares, and then blockade on the dark squares, or vice versa if it's a light squared bishop. So you can almost always achieve this kind of position if you've got a bishop against the pawns and they're connected, as long as your opponent's king is out of play. So you just have, with the bishop, you can attack the pawns and then get in front of them. So that's it for the connected pawns. Let's look at the next position. This is the case of separated pawns, and just like connected pawns were strong against a rook and weak against a bishop, separated pawns are strong against the bishop and weak against the rook. So the rook can hold off these separated pawns. If they were on the 6th rank, you could have a rook here, but even on the 7th rank, you could have a rook sitting down here and preventing both of them from queening. But they're strong against the bishop because the bishop cannot take one of the pawns and then come back and get the other one when they're this far advanced. So in this position, it's white's turn to move. His bishop is already in the ideal spot. He's guarding both pawns, preventing them from passing. So he moves the king, tries to bring it in. And now black can win the game by just sacrificing one of the pawns. And the bishop has to take, or that will become a queen. And then the second pawn becomes a queen. So separated pawns are the way to go when you're fighting against a bishop. Let's look at the next position. Even when this pawn is a couple steps further back, this is still quite dangerous. In fact, this position is winning for black. So it's white's turn to move. The bishop goes here and seemingly stops both pawns. But you can actually win this with black, and the idea is to use one of the pawns as a decoy. And this is your second quiz. Which pawn should you give away? Which pawn is your decoy, and which one is the one that's going to queen? Okay, pause the video and think about this till you come up with an answer. I'm going to give it away. The decoy is the one that's furthest from queening, so this one here. If the bishop takes it, then the other one marches forward and the bishop can't get back in time to stop it, so it'll become a queen. So you might ask here, did the bishop have to take? Well, if it doesn't take, say the king comes forward, that's your other try and get there in time with the king. This pawn moves forward again. Now the bishop has to move to stop this pawn from queening and stop this pawn from queening, and now we're in the situation we had before where you can use either pawn as a decoy and the other one will queen. So separated pawns are quite dangerous against the bishop. And the last situation I wanted to show you is how you can actually stop the separated pawns. It just requires, cancel out, it requires the cooperation of the king. What happened here? Here. Sorry, I went ahead to the wrong one. So white's king is now in a better position. It's white's turn to move, and black's pawn is about to become a queen here. So this is the more dangerous threat, and the king is too far away to do anything about it. Plus, he couldn't do anything if he was closer because black's king is in the ideal position to help that pawn become a queen. So you have to use the bishop. You move it here, and now this pawn can't go forward without being traded. But if black moves the d pawn forward, then white's king is just going to come up and grab it. So, for example, something like this. Yeah, I guess now. Well, if he pushes now, you just take it. So now he might try to do this, but he's going to lose the pawn. So let's back up. In this situation, after bishop to d5, really his best try is to push that pawn forward right away. Try and get his king into a position to help this pawn become a queen. But I set this up where white's king was just close enough to get here and attack the pawn, and black can't save it. So that's a draw. And if the black king were one step closer, or if the white king were one step further away, black would actually win this game. So if you imagine the black king on this square, white's king goes here, and then the black king goes to this square, and now the king is guarding the whole path of this pawn all the way down to becoming a queen, and so black would win. So just one step closer. So if we back up to this position, if we back up to the beginning position, this one. Yeah, this is the position. So if white's king were one step further away, then this pawn could become a queen after the trade. So anyway, that's your lesson about the power of the pawns against the bishop. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll be talking next week about how the knight can fight against the pawns, and hope you guys enjoy that one too. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I'll see you again then. Bye.